Well, good morning. We're into week 11. We're going to do chapter 10 of Ezra, which is the last chapter of the book. It's a short chapter. I probably won't, I don't think I'll have enough to fill the whole 45 minutes, or 40 minutes. So we may get into the introduction of Nehemiah, because I'm also going to do Nehemiah, which is the following book. So we finished chapter 9 last week, and it was about the intermarriages, and 10 continues that problem about intermarriage. I'm going to start out reading chapter 10, verses 1 through 8. So while Ezra prayed and made confession, weeping and casting himself down before the house of God, a very great assembly of men, women, and children gathered to him out of Israel, for the people wept bitterly. And Shechaniah, the son of Jehiel, of the sons of Elam, addressed Ezra. We have broken faith with our God and have married foreign women from the peoples of the land. But even now there is hope for Israel in spite of this. Therefore, let us make a covenant with our God to put away all these wives and their children, according to the counsel of my Lord and of those who tremble at the commandment of our God. And let it be done according to the law. Arise, for it is your task, and we are with you. Be strong and do it. Then Ezra arose and made the leading priests and Levites and all Israel take an oath that they would do as had been said. So they took the oath. Then Ezra withdrew from before the house of God and went to the chamber of Jehonan, the son of Elishahab, where he spent the night, neither eating bread nor drinking water, for he was mourning over the faithfulness of the exiles. And a proclamation was made throughout Judah and Jerusalem to all the returned exiles that they should assemble at Jerusalem, and that if anyone did not come within 3 days by order of the officials and the elders, all his property would be forfeited, and he himself banned from the congregation of exiles. So we never want to, this started out, or we had just finished this prayer, so we never want to underestimate the power of prayers of one dedicated believer, and Ezra was very dedicated. And if James 5 verses 16 through 18 says, "Therefore confess your sins to one another and pray for one another, that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person has great power as it is working. Elijah was a man with a nature like ours, and he prayed fervently that it might not rain. And for 3 years and 6 months it did not rain on the earth. Then he prayed again, and heaven gave rain, and the earth bore its fruit." So Ezra, being that dedicated believer, for the intercession of only one concerned person can make a difference in what God will do for his people. As Ezra prayed and wept at the altar before the house of God, a very great congregation of men and women and children came together and fell under conviction of sin. And they too wept bitterly, as it said in verse 1. This response wasn't something that Ezra worked up. It was something that he prayed down. The priest had offered a lamb on the altar, but Ezra gave the Lord an even greater sacrifice. As much as anyone else, I appreciate a sense of humor and a good laugh. But there comes a time when God's people need to stop laughing and start weeping and confessing. James 4, 9 through 9 to 10, it says, "Lament and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up." So that's God's formula for revival. Shechaniah was the spokesperson or spokesman for the people, a man whose own relatives had sinned by marrying foreign women. And that's in 1026, where he's listed there. I've heard about churches that have split up, churches that have split and have lost their witness and almost destroyed because people have sided with their disobedient relatives in matters of discipline instead of with the Lord and his word. Perhaps Shechaniah remembered what Moses wrote about the evils of being partial in judgment. In Deuteronomy 13, chapter 13, verses 6 through 11, it says, "If your brother, the son of your mother, or your son or your daughter, or the wife you embrace, or your friend who is as your own, so entices you secretly, saying, 'Let us go and serve other gods,' which neither you nor your fathers have known, some of the gods of the peoples who are around you, whether near you or far off from you, from the one end of the earth to the other. You shall not yield to him or listen to him, nor shall your eye pity him, nor shall you spare him, nor shall you conceal him, but you shall kill him. Your hand shall be first against him to put him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people. You shall stone him to death with stones, because he sought to draw you away from the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. And all Israel shall hear and fear and never again do any such wickedness as this among you." And then in Deuteronomy 17, 1 through 13, "You shall not sacrifice to the Lord your God an ox or a sheep in which is a blemish, any defect whatever, for that is an abomination to the Lord your God. If there is found among you within any of your towns that the Lord your God is giving you a man or a woman who does what is evil in the sight of the Lord your God, in transgressing his covenant, and has gone and served other gods and worshipped them, or the sun, or the moon, or any of the host of heaven, which I have forbidden, and it is told you, and you hear of it, then you shall inquire diligently. And if it is true and certain that such an abomination has been done in Israel, then you shall bring out to your gates that man or woman who has done this evil thing, and you shall stone that man or woman to death with stones. On the evidence of 2 witnesses, or of 3 witnesses, the one who is to die shall be put to death. A person shall not be put to death on the evidence of 1 witness. The hand of the witnesses shall be first against him to put him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people. So you shall purge the evil from your midst. If any case arises requiring decision between one kind of homicide and another, one kind of legal right and another, or one kind of assault and another, any case within your towns that is too difficult for you, then you shall arise and go to the place that the Lord your God will choose. And you shall come to the Levitical priests and to the judge who is in office in those days, and you shall consult them, and they shall declare to you the decision. Then you shall do according to what they declare to you from that place that the Lord will choose, and you shall be careful to do according to all that they direct you, according to the instructions that they give you, and according to the decision which they pronounce to you, you shall do. You shall not turn aside from the verdict, what they declare to you, either to the right hand or to the left. The man who acts presumptuously by not obeying the priest who stands to minister there before the Lord your God, or the judge, that man shall die. So you shall purge the evil from Israel, and all the people shall hear and fear and not act presumptuously. Paul taught this same principle for the local church. In 1 Timothy 5:21, it says, I solemnly charge you in the presence of God and of Christ Jesus and of his chosen angels to maintain these principles without bias, doing nothing in the spirit of partiality. To most of the people that gathered around Ezra, the situation probably appeared hopeless, but not to Shechaniah, who said, in 10:2, he says, but even at the end of 10:2, it says, but even now there is hope for Israel in spite of this. He confessed that he and the rest of the nation were guilty and then suggested a plan of action. And the plan was a simple plan, but demanding. First, the nation would corporately covenant to obey God's law. Then Ezra and a group of men who trembled at the word would decide how the matter would be settled. And the people promised to obey whatever was decreed. But everything had to be done according to the law of Moses. And Ezra accepted this plan, and he immediately swore in the leading priests and Levites as the committee to investigate the matter and see to it that the law was obeyed. But instead of participating immediately in the investigation, he withdrew into one of the rooms of the temple to fast and to pray for God's guidance. He left it to the special committee to make the decisions to tell the people what to do. Wise is a leader who involves other people in the process, especially when this issue is so sensitive. So the committee issued a proclamation to the people of Jerusalem and of the outlying villages to appear in Jerusalem within 3 days, or to be in danger of expulsion from the community. At that time, each marriage would be investigated, and the committee would discover who had violated the Mosaic law. A humble, praying leader, a willing people, and a faithful and courageous committee worked together to accomplish this task. And picking up in verse 9, 10:9, it says, Then all the men of Judah and Benjamin assembled at Jerusalem within the 3 days. It was the 9th month on the 20th day of the month. And all the people sat in the open square before the house of God, trembling because of this matter and because of the heavy rain. And Ezra, the priest, stood up and said to them, "You have broken faith and married foreign women, and so increased the guilt of Israel. Now then, make confession to the Lord, the God of your fathers, and do his will. Separate yourselves from the peoples of the land and from the foreign wives." Then all the assembly answered with a loud voice, "It is so. We must do as you have said." But the people are many, and it is a time of heavy rain. We cannot stand in the open, nor is this a task for 1 day or for 2, for we have greatly transgressed in this matter. Let our officials stand for the whole assembly. Let all in our cities who have taken foreign wives come at appointed times, and with them the elders and judges of every city, until the fierce wrath of our God over this matter is turned away from us. So on December 19th, I don't know how they get this exact date, but it said in my reading, on December 19th in 458 BC, the men of the two main tribes of Judah and Benjamin, plus exiles from other tribes, they gathered in the street before the temple to start the solemn investigation. This meeting may have been convened at the Water Gate, where Ezra later expounded the law to the people. Now, this is not the Water Gate back in Nixon's day. This is one of the gates of the temple, of the city, around the city, the gates around the wall around the city that we will talk about all those gates when we get into Nehemiah. It was December. It was the middle of the rainy season. From October to mid-April is the rainy season. But this was in December, and the crowd trembled, not only because of the weather, but also because they were sure the heavy rain was a prelude to the judgment of God. Ezra made it clear that the mixed marriages would have to be dissolved, and he called upon the faithful Jews to separate themselves from those who disobeyed God's law. Once again, Ezra was given counsel by others, and he accepted it. Blessed is the leader who has open ears to the ideas of others. It was suggested that Ezra empower the committee of priests and Levites to work with the leaders of the tribes, as well as the elders and judges of the towns, because they knew who the people were. They were closer to us. And let them determine who was guilty. It was impractical to try to interrogate so many people in one place, especially when the weather was so inclement, and the work couldn't be done in a day. So except for 4 men who dissented in Ezra 10:15, the crowd agreed at this idea and promised to obey. 10:15, it says, only Jonathan, the son of Ashiel, and Jaziah, the son of Tikvah, opposed this, and Meshullam and Shabbathai, the Levite, supported them. And verse 16 says, then the returned exiles did so. Ezra the priest selected men, heads of fathers' houses, according to their fathers' houses, each of them designated by name. On the first day of the 10th month, they sat down to examine this matter. So 10 days later, on December 29th, Ezra and the leaders sat down, and they began to investigate it. 3 months later, on March 27th, 457 BC, their work was finished. And this must have been a difficult job to do, but they persisted with the help of the Lord. And they discovered over 100 offenders, including 27 priests, Levites, temple singers, and gatekeepers, people who would have expected to be models of obedience. When spiritual leaders begin to sin, it doesn't take long for other people to follow. And while we don't want to minimize the enormity of the sin, it should be noted that the number of offenders was very low when compared to the size of the population. Now, if you remember, 80 years previous to this, the first 50,000 Jews had returned with Zerubbabel and Joshua. And during the ensuing years, the people surely had multiplied. The total number of offenders was probably less than 1% of the residents. However, it's better to deal with these matters when the numbers are low, because the longer you wait, the more the sin will spread. Even one offender is one too many. Ecclesiastes 9:18 says, "Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good." What is it saying? One bad apple can destroy the bushel, or whatever it is. It just takes one sometimes, or it doesn't take many. The guilty priests promised to put away their heathen wives, and they offered sacrifices to seek God's forgiveness. So, start in verse 18. It says, "Now there were found some of the sons of the priests who had married foreign women." Oh, goodness. I didn't. Maasaiah, Eleazar, Jareb, Gidelath, of the sons of Jeshua and the son of Zodadak and his brothers. They pledged themselves to put away their wives, and their guilt offering was a ram of the flock for their guilt. The book of Isaiah opens in chapter 2 with a list of names of the Jewish heroes who willingly returned to the land to serve the Lord. And the book ends here in chapter 10 with a list of sinners who disobeyed God, but publicly made it right with the Lord, and the people. But making it right didn't automatically heal every wound or remove every pain, because the women involved had to leave the community and go back to the heathen homes from which they had come, taking with them whatever children had been born to the nation. You know, it's easy to pull the nails out of a board, but it's impossible to pull out the holes that are left behind. Over 13 years later, the problem of mixed marriages appeared again in Nehemiah, while Nehemiah was governor in Jerusalem. And we'll find that when we get to Nehemiah 13, chapter 13. It's possible for leaders to enforce the law and reform a nation's conduct, but only God can change the human heart and produce the kind of character that wants to do what's right. That's the difference between Reformation and revival. Now, I think we're done with Ezra, with the a question that is, could the heathen women converted to Judaism and saved their marriages? What do you think? Think that could have been possible?
I think I better go back to verse 23.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I got it up there, don't I? Exodus 23:23. Read it, Terry.
Well, this is the conquest of the land by when they're first coming to the land. For my angel will go before you and bring you into the land of the Amorites and Hittites, Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I will completely destroy them. Is that 23?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So, way back then, they're saying that they were supposed to destroy all these people around them, and now here they have married those women. So the question is, could the heathen women converted to Judaism and save their marriages? Yes or no? By reading that. What do you think?
Not by that, but maybe they could have.
I remember reading somewhere, I can't remember where, that they were told to leave their wives of the other heathen nations, but I can't remember where it was. Somewhere in the back of my mind it says that.
What's Deuteronomy 7:1 say? And I can't remember. I thought I had written it down in here, and I don't, so I got to look myself.
And it says, when the Lord your God brings you into the land you are entering to possess, and drives out before you many nations, the Hittites, Giborites, Amorites, Canaanites, all those.
Yeah, all those.
Seven
Yep.
nations larger and stronger than you, and when the Lord your God has delivered them over to you, and you have defeated them, then you must destroy them totally. You make no treaty with them, show them no mercy. Chapter verse 3: do not intermarry with them. Do not give your sons and daughters to take their daughters for your sons, for they will turn your children away from following me to serve other gods. The Lord's anger will burn against you and will quickly destroy you.
So those women shouldn't have even been there in the first place, right?
But they were.
But they were. They were. So do you still think, could have they converted and saved all this trouble?
You got another verse there somewhere?
1 Kings 11:1. It says, now King Solomon loved many foreign women, along with the daughter of Pharaoh, Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Sidonians, Hittite women, from the nations concerning which the Lord had said to the people of Israel, you shall not enter into marriage with them, neither shall they with you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods. Solomon clung to these in love. He had 700 wives. Holy cow. I had trouble with one. No.
He also had a lot of money.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. So I don't know. I'm thinking they probably couldn't. I don't think they could have converted to Judaism because the women were from those other lands. I just, and they didn't do that. And it doesn't talk about that any of them converted to try and save themselves. So I guess, what's the wrong spot here? So I guess in my opinion, they probably, no, they couldn't have done that. So I just was wondering what you guys might have thought after you read.
Talk about Ruth, maybe? You know, she converted, and she was a
Yes, she did convert. I was trying to remember, and I taught Ruth too. But I gotta go back into my database and it's plugged up. But yes, she did, but she did, yeah. I don't know, oh, okay, so not ready to go there yet. I guess you're right, she did. I didn't think about her, because that didn't come up in this, where this question came from. Those were the 3 verses that it took me to when
In
I,
the Old Testament, you don't find the Jews trying to convert people to Judaism. That was not part of what God told them to do, and they
Right.
didn't do it. But Ruth converted on her own. And she was actually accepted, and not only that, she becomes an ancestor of Christ.
yes. Now, but she had,
And that's not the only example. Exodus, when they left Egypt, there were Egyptian people that was God to follow.
there was non-Jews that went with them, wasn't there? Yeah. But well, I guess we just have to assume that they converted. I mean, they might have just went along for the ride. That's true. That's true. Well, you know, there are things that we're not told. I guess maybe it's not important. I don't know. Anyway.
No, I think there's an importance in a different way. I think too often, let me get back here. I think too often we look at a passage like this in Ezra, and we concentrate only on whether this is a mandate for divorce in marriages when they're unequal, or social security, which is correct. Paul does that in the New Testament. But there's more going on here than just the idea of mixed messages in chapter 10. Israel itself is a symbol of the church overall. Okay? Ezra, one of the themes of it is about the way that Jesus was going to be a savior and bring the church out of bondage, like people out of bondage, like they did in Exodus. It was a parallel to Exodus in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So that's an underlying theme that I think we miss too often. This was Israel that was supposed to bring the promised seed.
Right.
It was influenced by foreign nations and foreign marriages that got them into problem in the first place to take them into bondage. So this is a kind of a symbol of the purging that has to go on to keep the church pure. Okay? More than it is individual marriages having to be divorced. We can't miss that point, or we go down a rabbit hole that has some problems in it. I think, the last thing, I think that these isolated cases like we've seen with Ruth and Exodus and possibly here could point towards, like some of the other Old Testament passages point towards the proselytization of the Gentiles into the church when they get into the New Testament.
Yep. I see what you're saying. Yep. Well, that finishes Ezra.
Well, I got one tiny comment.
Go ahead.
We read in chapter 10 about this guy in verse 2 that was saying, okay, we've had unfaithfulness. But this fellow here is not mentioned. There's actually 113 that are mentioned as being guilty of marrying foreign women. But it's not this guy. But if you notice, he's called the son of Jehiel, of the sons of Elam.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go over to chapter 10, verse 26, it's got the names of the sons of Elam that did marry foreign women, and one of them is named Jehiel.
Yep.
So this guy, Shechaniah, back in verse 2, that when he says we, he didn't include himself in the we, but he may have included his own father as being one of the people that had done wrong. Because it's the same name
Yes.
in verse
And-
2, Jehiel, as in verse 26.
And I think I had mentioned something about his own family
Yeah,
was brought up in that, and somewhere here I did. If I can find my notes. Somewhere here, I mentioned that it was some of his own family, which I said was going to be later in chapter 10. Where was that?
well, you mentioned verse 26, which you didn't read.
Oh,
There's another detail in the very last verse of the book, 44. All these married foreign wives, and some of them had wives by whom they had children. Well, there were 113, and it was some of them, which doesn't mean many, it's fewer, that had children. So we're not talking about thousands of people here.
no,
We're talking about
No.
113 fellas that had married, women that they were disobeying God and married, and some of them had children. I get the impression from reading this that this hadn't been going on for years and years and years, that this was fairly recent, because not all of them had kids. There were some of them that had children, so it was a bad situation, and he had to bring it up in front of all the exiles. And when you said, remember it said that all the exiles had to show up in 3 days. That was easily over 50,000 people. And yet they still ended up having to specify 113 men that had done wrong. So it was a small number of people, but it was a real problem. And they addressed it and took care of it.
yeah, it doesn't really say exactly when this intermarriaging thing started. I know it starts talking about it in chapter 9 when Ezra finally gets to Jerusalem, and after he gets there and prays and have sin offerings and offerings, then the very first thing that comes up to him is that about this intermarriage thing, which was in chapter 9, which was, this is 80 years later from when they first arrived. So, yeah, I don't know when it started, but
But I don't think, I may be wrong, I don't think it started in Babylon. I think this was something after they got back.
correct, I believe so, yes.
So they were
Because
going back into the same,
those women wouldn't have been in Babylon, because they,
going back into the same practices of the same people they were supposed to destroy in the first place.
correct, yes. History keeps repeating itself. Bill?
Yeah, so you talked about Solomon and all his wives, and in 1 Kings 11, 4 says that Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God. And the heart of David as his father had been, it talks about the ones that he was following. So it makes it hard, and I kind of think about, Jesus said, it's hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Not possible, but it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's hard to have a wife of another nation for the Israelites. Can it be done? Yeah, but it would be hard. And it would be better off if they didn't do that. Because all the time when you look at this, when you look through the wives, it's like the wives turn their men, the wives of these foreigners turn their husbands against God, and they worship other idols, and they led them astray. It's over and over again, and it's that repeating pattern that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And those that don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it.
Then you got, yes.
I think we're missing a point here. Israel sits right on the main trade route from north to south.
Yes.
Okay, so we're concentrating on all these other countries that were in the promised land at the time, instead of maybe why they're coming from the north-south trade route.
Other
Not
non-Jewish people.
Yeah.
I get that, but somebody, I don't know who was, somebody mentioned that they didn't wipe out the original inhabitants completely. And I think we're missing that some of these wives may have come from trade. I might have said it in a roundabout way.
Okay. They could have, although I think it was, I mean, they just specifically call out the Canaanites and Hittites, and they do list those people who were in that land of Canaan when they first came there, and they were supposed to destroy, but they didn't. Yes?
Well, this is an example to us that God said them to destroy everyone and they didn't. He told them what would happen to them. And so he told them. He did.
Yep.
You need to remember that in your own life that, you follow God's word. If he says something's going to happen, it's going to happen.
Eventually. Sometimes, he's slow to anger, but it's going to happen. You're right. You're right. Earlier, when somebody was talking about, a thought entered my mind about converting people, the women converting, but I kind of fast forwarded to current times, and I ended up in this church because my wife brought me here. So she converted me. Now look what I'm doing. Never would have dreamed it. Okay, good. Now I can start out fresh next week with Nehemiah. I was thinking I was going to have to do the introduction this week, but we'll wait till next week to start to dig into Nehemiah. Thanks for everybody's participation. I appreciate it.